Today we're going to be diving back into Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea as we take a look at the Cleric and its 5 subclasses. So get ready to turn undead, or summon it, here on Rolling with Advantage. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Cleric and its 5 subclasses as we dive back into Astonishing Swordsmen and Sorcerers of Hyperborea. And all of these reviews, we're going to do just a quick look at each one of these classes and why you may want to consider running this in your game. So the Cleric is one of the 4 base classes, and the way this game works is each of the base classes then has several subclasses that are more specialized. Now, unlike other games where you start in one class and then go into a different class, this game you can play a base class all the way up, or you choose a subclass at level 1. There's no multi-classing, so these classes are meant to be played on its own. So the Cleric is a very good base class to play. It's fantastic, and we'll kind of take a look why. There's a lot of variety of what you can do with this class. You can use any armor, you can use any shield. You've got a myriad of weapons to pull from, and you only need a wisdom of 9, so it's pretty easy to roll into it. A D8 hit die means that they can take a hit. And their saving throws, now that I've played this game a good bit, I can tell you the death and sorcery bonuses to saving throw, they come up a good bit. You'd be surprised how many effects in this game require a death save. Poisons are notorious for making you roll some type of death save. Next, we want to take a look at the experience points table, and this is something we're going to be highlighting as we take a look at all of these classes, because in this game, like any classic D&D game, not all classes level at the same rate. If we take a look at the Cleric here, this is going to be the one that's going to level the fastest. Like all the base classes, they will level faster. So they get only 2,000 experience needed for level 2, and that kind of sets the standard of what you're going to need moving forward. We see that at level 1, they get a fighting ability, which in this game means you get a +1 to attack and damage. As that moves up, at level 3 you get 2, and then at level 4 you move up to a fighting ability of 3. This is not a bad progression for kind of a half fighter in a way. Turning ability requires talking about the turn undead ability, which is absolutely huge in this game. Undead is very prevalent in Hyperborea. And they also start off with a casting ability and tells you how many spells they can cast per day. Now, when you look at this chart, you do get a bonus to that equal to your wisdom stats. If you have a higher wisdom, you can cast more spells per day. And that's going to be all the classes that we look at today, save one. So if we take a look at the Cleric, they get Read Scrolls, they get Scribe Scrolls. This is going to be something we're going to see across for most of these classes today. This is pretty standard fare. The ability to kind of supplement their spells per day with scrolls. Now, they are going to be able to pull from the Cleric spell list. Now, this book is very cool in the fact that we have lots of different spell lists for different classes. So a Druid will pull from a different spell list than a Cleric will. And then like in a Magician, like a Necromancer pulls differently than a Pyromancer. So a lot of specialized spells. This one's going to be pulling from the Cleric table. And if you take a look at this class, it doesn't seem like there's a lot to it. But as we look at the other classes, I'm going to be referencing back to the Cleric, and you'll start to see why the Cleric is good. It's just an all-around good class because he can fight. He has the turn undead ability at level 1, and he's going to be casting spells at level 1. So he's got a lot of good base abilities to kind of just round out the party. So a Cleric is great because they can be a front line, because they can wear heavier armor, they can fight, they can support. It's just a good all-around class to take a look at if you're looking into playing some type of fighter-healer combo. It would be a great thing to look at for a Cleric. So as we take a look at the subclasses, the 5 subclasses that we'll be taking a look at today for the Cleric, it's going to be the Druid, Monk, Priest, Runegraver, and Shaman. Now, each one of these is going to play very differently and have different reasons on why you may want to play each one. So now let's dive into each one of them. Today, as we take a look at the Druid, first I want to say I love the art. I love the idea of this character riding some type of war pig with his spear over his head, lightning in the background, antlers coming off his helmet. It's just perfect. I love it. As we take a look at the druid, we're going to see a lot of things that we are accustomed to seeing in druids and other games. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting about this is that if you look at his experience table, it stays the same as the cleric. So he's going to level pretty much the same rate as the cleric. So, a druid is more specialized, but he's also giving up something for that specialization. You're going to need wisdom and charisma to roll this. So wisdom 9, charisma 12. He can't wear the heavier armor like we saw with the cleric. And his weapon choices, he has a lot of good ones on here, but he's missing some of those more martial type weapons that you would see with the cleric. And he does get the death and sorcery saves, which are huge in this game. Now, one thing we look at his table, he has a fighting ability and he has a casting ability that is actually the same as the cleric, but he's missing the turning ability. So this character cannot turn undead. That's a big thing to be thinking about when you're building your character and looking at the party is, does someone else have that ability? It's a good one to have. If we take a look through his abilities, clandestine tongue, that's you're speaking druidic. It's a good flavor for the character. Now here's one that's very interesting that I haven't seen in previous editions, and if I have, I've forgotten. But fire affinity, they get +2 bonus to saving throw versus fire-related effects, and I think that's interesting because it kind of gives us the sense, fire is something that's natural in nature, and they have an affinity towards it. So I think that'd be a cool way to kind of maybe give you some ideas of how you might role play this character, or maybe just how he sees the world around him in general, maybe a little bit different. I love things like that that kind of give us some type of direction, little cues on how to play the character. Natural identifications, he's going to be able to tell you what all the water and the plants and animals and things, but it's typical druid fare. I love this. Think of this as your nature check that you would have in other games. Well, this is the ability this class brings to the table, to be able to identify things in the wild, which, to be honest, is very important depending on the type of game you're playing, because in this world, it's points of light. You're in the wild a lot. So having a character there that can kind of tell you, hey, don't eat that, is probably a good thing to have. Read scrolls, scribe scrolls, same thing we saw with the cleric. We're going to see most of the classes today have this ability. It's a good way to kind of help supplement his spells per day. Sorcery now, a little bit different. They're going to be carrying, instead of spell books, they write on like bark or parchment, just a little different flavor, and you're pulling from a different spell list, the druids are, as opposed to what we see with the clerics. A little different spell table that we can take a look at later. The other thing is that they get a traverse overgrowth, so they don't worry about briars or tangles or brushes or anything. It's a good flavor ability that will come up some, and as a DM, I would leverage that. Put some difficult terrain in your combat and have the druid have the ability to use this ability. So me as a DM, anytime I have a character who has certain abilities, I really want to tailor things in the game that will allow them to use those types of abilities. Let the assassin assassinate, let your druid, spot something in the nature that, could warn the others. Make your players feel that they're playing these classes. So with the traverse overgrowth, it helps build better environments anyway. This is a good cue for your DM. All right. Charm immunity is a great thing at 5th level. They're in this, in the susceptibility to supernatural charms of creatures, which is really cool. And the other thing that you get at level 5 is you get to shape change. Now, this is what's very interesting about this game, is that there's not a lot of the restrictions in shape change that we see in other editions of D&D. At 5th level, you can turn into a bird and a fish, but you can only turn into small animals. So this isn't going to be like your moon druid that we see in 5th edition, where you're turning into a bear and mauling people really early. At 5th level, you're going to be able to be the consummate scout by being a crow or an eagle, swim around, do something, snakes, turtles. You get all of that at level 5. And at level 7 is whenever they can take on the medium animals that we see. That's when you're going to go into bears and big snakes and things of that nature. But here's something that's very interesting. They can stay in this form indefinitely. And I think that's very cool, is that you could get to a point where your druid just stays as a bear. for weeks. And I think that could be very interesting. And they even put something in here that if they stay in that form for 4 weeks or 28 days, they risk losing their own humanity. And I think that would be an interesting roleplay idea. If maybe a party comes across an animal that used to be a druid and just forgot they were a druid. I love that. Good flavor. I've actually done something like that in a previous 5th edition game. So I love that that's there. One thing to do note is that you do get a little bit of a healing bump when you shape change. 50% of any prior hit point that you lost is regained when you shape change. So it's not quite as broken as we see in the 5th edition version of this, but there's still something there for it, which is really cool. Okay. And then Druid Hierarchy just kind of talks a lot about, like, whenever you gain like your 9th level, which you see with everybody, they get strongholds. They get something that kind of moves them into a new tier of play. And for the druid, they have this whole druidic society that they kind of get into. Also at 11th level, they age very slowly. So every 13 years is 1 year for a druid once they hit 11th level. So this is one of the classes we're going to take a look at. If you're playing the long game, this is a character that could be around for a very long period of time in Hyperborea. So pretty interesting. Also maybe a good idea for DMs out there that you could introduce a character, an NPC that's way old because of this type of an ability. Good, like Sage or Seer to kind of seek out. Good idea. All right, Monk. Monk is an ability, has an ability that is absolutely incredible. I'll get into that in just a second. Now, the Monk, I feel, is a class that you're going to need really good stats to play effectively. It says on here that you need Strength, Dex, and Wisdom of all 9, which those aren't high numbers, but I'm telling you, once we get in here, you're going to see the Monk needs some serious stats to play effectively. The reason is they can't wear armor, they can't wear shields. They really want to play that ninja, monk style, and you're gonna need some pretty good stats to play this well, or you're gonna have a rough day. So the monk, you take a look here. You're gonna need a little bit more experience to level than we saw in the others. They do get a fighting ability that moves up just like we've seen with the rest of the cleric classes. They get an AC bonus as they go. This AC bonus does not stack with your dexterity defensive bonus. It's there to kind of help bridge, if you don't have all the stats you need to play, you have this AC bonus because you're going to be running around in just clothes. And that can be difficult. You're going to be in a situation where you could take a lot of hits. So I would recommend also having a very high constitution and a high strength, since you're going to be in melee as well. So, you could make it more of a dex-based ranged monk. But combat as a monk is going to be one of those things, like we see in previous editions of this game. It can be a little rough to start, and it can kind of turn into a powerhouse down the road. And as we get into the abilities, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. So with Accurate Strike, what this allows you to do is gain damage for being unarmed. It helps you, kind of keep up with the damage, since you're going to be using, you do at level 1, we're doing a D4 with our fist weapon or kicking people. You get another +1 on top of that. Now, again, it says that this ability does not stack with the high strength bonus. So look at the AC bonus and the damage bonus of the monk that they give you to kind of help you not need as many stats as you may think. But I still feel that you're going to need pretty decent stats to get this guy off the ground. Now, Block Missile is an ability that is great, and this is another one of those I say to DMs, let your monk do this. A lot of times I see in games is once a monk picks up this ability, they stop being the target of ranged attacks. Let your monks be monks. Now, here's the thing that's very interesting, though, is even a magic missile or acid arrow spell can be blocked. I think it would be really cool to have some type of spell being shot at the monk and he just pushes it off. Like, I think that's really cool, and I'd like to see that in a game. Here's the ability that I was talking about earlier that's incredible. Cellular Adjustment. Once per day, they can supernaturally alter their cells to heal physical damage equal to 2 hit points per level of experience, but they can also do it to somebody else. So that's good. It's like, think of it as like a little bit of a lay on hands deal, but this is the one that's huge. Once per week, the monk can purge himself or another of either a disease or a poison. That is huge. I said earlier, diseases and poisons are huge in Hyperborea. Having somebody that, even if it's on a 1-week timer, can pull something awful off of somebody else is absolutely huge. So that is one of the main reasons I would consider playing a monk, is because you have that ability at level 1. Controlled fall, slow fall, we've seen this. Great, flavor ability. Defensive ability, same that we saw with the accurate strike, just kind of helps you have a good defense. Don't need the stats as heavy. They can detect secret doors, which is a 3 in 6 chance. That's really good. And then we talk about empty hand. Now, I will tell you the layout on here was a little confusing when I first read it, and I'll tell you why here in a second. As you go through this, you get +1 bonus on all your attack rolls. It does tell you that you can use, basically like brass knuckles or something of that nature to kind of add bonus damage to it as well. So at level 1, you can do 1d4 plus 2 if you're doing that, and you're probably going to be dual wielding that. So you can do some pretty decent damage with this character. And here's where the layout on this kind of threw me off. The next one says at 5th level, the empty hand attack is equivalent to magical weapons. And then you move down to the next ability that started, and it says on a natural 19 or 20, the attack roll, a stunning blow, is delivered. Now, that is really good because that stun lasts 2d4 rounds, which is huge. If you land that on somebody, that is just opening them up for a world of pain. And the reason I said this is confusing to me is when you look at this, it's like, do I get that at 5th level or do I get that at 1st level? And because it doesn't say at 5th level, and I feel that maybe, I don't know, maybe that should have come before the 5th level in the ability. But anyway, so the way I've looked at this is you get this at 1st level, you roll 19 or 20, you have the ability to stun somebody. I think that's amazing. Now, at 12th level, once per day, you can use Quivering Palm. It's the death blow. It's the thing you build towards for the monk. That's huge. Now, you also get this run, because you're unarmored, you can pretty much stay unencumbered. You're going to be able to run really fast. I would use that to your advantage. You're fast, run in, hit and run tactics, I think, would be great for a monk. And you also get superior willpower, which is +2 bonus to saving throws versus any sorcery that would influence your mind. That's huge. These saving throws in this game can be brutal, and you need any ability that you can get to help you in that regards is huge. Speak with nature, you get speak with animals at 4th level. It's huge. You can also speak with plants as you get higher up. It kind of almost like a druidic feel for the monk, being at one with nature and the balance. I like that. Simulate death, which is kind of fun. You get like a feigned death ability at level 5, and at level 9 is everyone else gets some type of stronghold deal. You're going to be building a monastery. Now, the last thing that we want to talk about with the monk is that they are also kind of thieves, in the fact that they get some of the thief abilities. They get climb, discern noise, hide, and move silently. So you can be everything that you would think. So you've got a little bit of a druid feel to it, being one with nature. They've got the martial adept. They've got a little bit of the healing, like a paladin would almost. And then they've also got a thief. So you got a lot of different things that you can do with a monk. They can do a lot of things. I just think early on, it may be hard for players to realize that they can't take the hits, and they're kind of a melee class. So I think that's kind of the challenge, but also maybe some of the fun of playing this type of character. So that's the monk. All right, priest. Priest is the class that, as I was going through this book, I kind of overlooked. It's like, yeah, okay, priest. And the more I dove in and the more I looked at this class can be an absolute powerhouse. He is a bit of a glass cannon, but can be the one person in the party that, as you get levels up, can carry a party. He really can. So this is what I want to kind of focus in on here as we take a look at the priest. The priest, wisdom, charisma, you only need 9 of each. You're going to want a higher wisdom. You want like a 16 wisdom to really run this guy well. Hit die is only a d4. You're not going to be doing a lot with weapons. You can use a quarterstaff or a sling. We're probably going to be using a sling a good bit. And you do get your death and sorcery at +2. This guy, He wants to stay as far away from combat as humanly possible. His hit points are only a D4. So that's going to be tough. And they're not going to go up a lot. So having a good constitution would be good for this character, to give them that extra bonus hit points every round or every level. They level pretty quick too. They only need 2,000 experience. They're going to level as quick as just a base cleric. What you're giving up for the priest over playing a cleric, though, is your fighting ability is not very good. And you can't wear the armor that we looked at the other classes. But let me show you what you do get. Your turning ability and casting ability are going to move up, just like we saw with the cleric. You get to read scrolls. You get to scribe scrolls, just like we saw with the cleric. The sorcerer is going to be pulling from the cleric spell list, just as we saw with the others. But pause for a second. They begin their careers with knowledge of 4 level 1 spells as opposed to 3. And if you look at the chart, they can cast 2 per day as opposed to 1. And then if you have a high enough wisdom, you can get a bonus spell slot. So you're going to be able to cast more spells out of the gate than a cleric, but keep reading. Priests develop 4 new spells at each level gain. They are going to have a lot of tricks up their sleeve. They're going to be able to cast a lot more spells. And I think that means with the cleric versus priest, these are 2 different play styles. The priest is going to be standing in the back and doing more support. They're going to be, casting more spells. They're going to be more into the magic of the game, whereas a cleric will kind of be doing a bit of both. A cleric can pull a double duty. The priest is more, I'm in the back. They get turn undead. They daemon rack. That 9th level, they can actually imprison the daemon and do all kinds of fun stuff with that. That could be a whole reason for this character's existence, is to build up to that. That could be really, really cool role play. Now, if that wasn't enough, we have to talk about this is an optional ability. And I, in my game, would say this is absolutely not optional. This is incredible, and I want to do it. But depending on the deity that this priest is focusing on, you get different abilities. You pick up an additional ability at level 1, and then like an ultimate ability at level 12. Now, the cool thing is a lot of these are going to get once per day abilities at level 1, which is almost going to give them another spell to cast. So think of it now, if you've got high enough wisdom, you're at level 1, you're casting 3 spells a day, then you're going to get an additional ability. So you've got 4 abilities a day you're doing at level 1, which is really good. So these are all the deities, and I like getting into the different deities in this game because it kind of gives you that savage feel that, all these gods are different shades of not that great. This is almost like the outcast gods in a way. But the one that when I first looked over this, I was like, oh, let me see what Cthulhu does. Let me see what Tsathoggua does. But it's the Kraken. If I were going to play a priest today, I would pick Kraken. And here's why. At first level, you can cast Mirror Image. I think it's great. It's a good survivability thing. It's something that I think would really help you get through the early levels. Now, the capstone ability, the 12th level ability, is once per day you can conjure 12 squid-like appendages that as black tentacles. The idea that I could have this character summon all of these tentacles, my imagination just goes crazy of okay, a Kraken priest to me would be a ton of fun. I mean, you can look over this list. There's a lot of cool ideas you can get for characters, but that's the one I'm like, oh man, that would be fun. So I'm excited to see a priest in play. I think this would be a lot of fun. All right, the Runegraver. The Runegraver is your fighter cleric. If you really want to be the guy that's just up in front, mashing heads and calling on some divine power, this is your guy. His saving modifiers are transformation and sorcery, not the death save. That might be something to take in consideration. He can use any weapon. He can use small shields. He can use any armor. D8 is his health. And as we skipped ahead a little too far here. Sorry. As we take a look at the experience table, he's going to need the most to level. This is barbarian level experience need. It's 3,000. And we take a look. His fighting ability moves up the same as a fighter, and his casting ability moves up the same as a cleric. But he is limited on what he can cast, and he can only cast from his runes. So I feel personally the experience need for the Runegraver is a little high, being that they don't have the flexibility in the runes that you would see with a Cleric. Now, that being said, I have not seen a Runegraver at the table, so maybe it's deceptively powerful and they felt that the experience table needed to be a little bit higher. I don't think it's crazy high. I might have made it 2,500 a level, but again, I wasn't in on the playtest, so maybe they saw, wow, this thing's really stinking good. So how a Runegraver works, its main mechanic is runegraving. So what happens is he only starts with one rune, and he can cast that once a day at level 1. And then as he levels up, he gets additional runes where eventually you will have all of the runes that you see on the table here at the bottom. Now, the first one I would take a look at getting would be enlargement. And the way the runes work is you actually have to like cut yourself, and for every level, that's a point of damage that you take to do this. The enlargement actually is really cool. It's a huge damage bonus that you get. So if you're going to be running into combat wearing heavy armor with a shield and a big axe, and now you're going to get a damage bonus for being like this massive, like 9-foot tall charging Viking Runegraver, I think it'd be really cool. So I'm excited to play this character. I think it'd be a fun thing to play. But I'm curious to see the power spike that this character gets as its level, because the experience table is showing that his power spike is pretty strong. So I'm curious to see what this actually looks like at the table. As he gets going, there's a lot of other cool abilities that he can get, and he at the 6th level spell is actually reincarnation, which is pretty interesting. So there's a lot of, the fact that you could cast Hold Person as a fighter Cleric looks really strong. It looks really good. The other thing that he has, I think, is awesome is he has this thing called an ale horn, and you can drink from this Nordic horn, and once per day, you can heal off of it. 2 hit points per your CA level, which it goes up by 1, so it's 2 hit points per level. And it can be shared with other people, and then once per week, you can add honey to the water, and it will produce a magical mead that can cure disease. Now, like the monk, that ability is really, really stinking good, and I would consider having someone who could do that in any party. I think it's just a great ability to have. All right. Casting lots, he can kind of do that once. I think it's once per day he can do this to kind of, beseech his ancestors to say which way should we go, kind of thing. I think it's really cool flavor. Love the flavor abilities. Okay, let me sure I'm saying this right. Knifing pole or nithing pole? Correct me in the comments below. But what this is an ability that he gets where he puts up this basically this giant totem, and he faces it towards his enemy, and it bestows a curse on him. I think this is a really cool ability. If you know you're going after a big bad, you know the name of him, you can put a curse on him before you go after him. I think that's really cool. You can only do it once per month, but I also think this is a good, you can almost build a whole adventure off of this, where maybe the party's got to go stop somebody who's done this to a lord or something. I think it'd be kind of an interesting idea. At 9th level for his stronghold, he gets a Berserker Horde, which really kind of just goes with the whole Runegraver thing. He also calls an initiate, so we kind of get into that stronghold thing. And I love how they put the rune name, and the poem that goes with it. The amount of creativity that they put into this game to help players get into their characters is fantastic. I love this. I love they put these, you could have just skipped over this and just put in the mechanics of the character or some art, move on to the next one. But the fact that they did this work is just showcasing how great this game is. They really put a lot of effort into helping players get into Hyperborea and get into their characters. So huge props for that. Okay. And there's the Runegraver. Okay, the Shaman. Love the Shaman. The Shaman is a class that I do have at the table. I introduced an NPC Shaman when I had 2 players playing. Then we had 2 more players join, and one of those players chose to play a Shaman. So I actually have 2 Shamans in my group currently, and they play a little differently. Shaman is a class that is a very flexible spellcaster. And there's a lot of really cool roleplay elements you can do with the shaman or witch doctor, whatever you want to call it. They need intelligence and wisdom, so think of this as your mage cleric. And they can use light armor. They can't use shields. They get a handful of weapons, nothing major. I've seen the War Club used in play. It's really, really decent. It's a good enough weapon. Saving throws to get death and sorcery. Those are the two big ones I would like to have. Okay. So Shaman needs a little bit more XP to level than a priest or a cleric, but not as much as a runegraver or a barbarian. So 2500 is kind of that middle ground. Their fighting ability is not very good. They don't get turn undead to level 3, but they do get it. So that's something to think about. It's like, I don't get it early, but I will eventually get it. But your casting ability goes up like any other caster. Now, the strength of this is some flexibility. When you make this character, you have to decide, am I going to be a cleric or a druid? And then also, when I hit level 2, I have to decide if I'm going to be pulling from the magician or the necromancer spell list. So once you make that decision is in, because now you're pulling from that. So you could be a druid necromancer, you could be a cleric necromancer, or a magician druid. The player in my group chose to be a cleric necromancer. So I think that's a very interesting thing that we're going to see get played out. Now, with the abilities that this character gets, draw poison. Again, anything you can do to help with druid, with drawing out poisons or stopping disease or stopping poisons, huge. And that ability came in night 1 and has been good immediately. They can use magic items. They can read and magic. They can read scrolls. They can scribe scrolls. So they have all the things that they would have for being like a magicianish character. The medicine man ability is absolutely incredible. Healing in this game is rare or harder to come by. Having anything like this on demand is huge. I've kind of lost count how many times this ability has been used to stabilize a character, especially in the early game where hit points are few and far between. I do make my shamans, go out and find all the things, the plants and the roots and all the things they need for their, healing salve or essential oils or whatever you want to call it for this. But this is basically the ability to go in and bandage people up and get them stable. It's huge. They also, at very first game, they used it to make an antidote poison, which helped save someone from a man scorpion sting. So that was a huge ability to see out the gate immediately. Yes, I threw a man scorpion at a low level party, but they lived, so we're all stronger for it. So we look over the abilities and, read magic, read scrolls, scribe scrolls, all good stuff. And then we're pulling spells from, like I said, either you get both of these spell abilities in the fact that you're going to either cleric druid plus also magician necromancer. So a lot of cool things that we do with this class. They get this totem that they can use, and they have an ability where, they really practice this dualism type thing, but once per week they can beseech his totem spirit for wisdom and guidance, kind of like the casting of the lots that we saw with the runegraver. And at 3rd level they do pick up turn undead. So the very last thing too, also I forgot, the shaman is the other class like the druid that gets the longevity where they can live a very long time. So those two subclasses kind of share that. So a little bit of a long video as we talk about all of the different things that we can do with clerics and the many subclasses. I highly recommend every party should have at least one of these in their group, just because of the utility, the healing, and surviving Hyperborea is rough. Like, part of the fun of the game is just surviving the environment and surviving, a lot of the nasties that are in this world carry a lot of poisons and diseases. So having some of those abilities on tap, I think, are huge for running these games. So that's it for today. I appreciate all the great feedback I've been getting for doing these videos. If you have any comments at all, I'd love to hear it. If you have played any of these classes and you've got some extra insight, please leave me a comment below. I'm particularly the runegraver. I want to see, that's one I'm very interested in to see at the table. But anyway, if you like this, please like, subscribe to the channel, and as always, keep rolling with advantage, and I'll see you next time as we dive back into Hyperborea. Talk to you later.